My name is Matt Smith. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the Global Entrepreneurship Network. I'm joined by Tom Hancock, our Research Associate, Jen as well. This is kind of one of two research sessions that we're running at GEC Plus this week. Now I want to give you a bit of background as to Jen's research activity, our network, our activities, the structure and purpose of this session. I'm going to run through a bit of data that we know of and that we've played a role in curating and publishing, and then hand over to a fantastic panel of academic experts to kind of discuss strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, gaps in entrepreneurship. So very briefly, Jen has been running what we call the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, GERN, for about 10 years now. We worked with Kauffman Foundation in the US to launch this in about 2014 or so, because we realized that the policymakers, particularly and practitioners, needed far greater quality and quantity of research and evidence around what works in entrepreneurship policy and practice. And there was a fantastic and much needed opportunity to connect academics and researchers around the world to kind of join dots and kind of increase impact by coordinating what are kind of very similar challenges that academics and those they are seeking to influence are facing around the world. So very briefly, the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, we now have probably 150 or so members across 50 countries or so. Really interesting mix of entrepreneurship academics, some international organizations, research institutes and similar. And the more we talk to them, the more over the past year, the more we've realized that there are really three key topics of interest that align with most of them. And it all comes back to action-orientated research. So we're interested very much, and most of our members are very interested in policy and practice related research. And within that, three areas: performance of programs, i.e. incubators, accelerators, startup programs, similar; performance of ecosystems; and performance of public policies relating to entrepreneurship. So that's what we're working to rally the network around. This is the second in a kind of two-part series of events that we've hosted, the last being in Cape Town in March, where we engaged our kind of and expanded our African kind of network to talk about these challenges. And very much the hope is that with the runway of 11 months through to Indiana GEC next year, we want to be kind of building on the discussions we'll have today, starting to identify some actionable outcomes in a smaller closed meeting tomorrow morning, and then working with members over the coming year to present data and launch some new coordinated collaborative research projects over the coming weeks and months. I wanted to use this opportunity briefly to share some of our findings from our latest GSER. Now, this is a report that we do with Startup Genome each year. We've been doing it for many years. This is using Crunchbase, deal room data, various other sources to make sense of the state of ecosystems around the world. Particularly well used by policymakers to make sense of where they are and what actions they can take to further enhance their ecosystems. So very top level, this is a global index. This is the findings from the latest version that was launched at London Tech Week back in June. Mostly similar kind of position as last year. London, New York, top two, LA, Tel Aviv, up a bit. Interesting increases from Seoul, Tokyo, Miami and others. You will notice there's a bit of a lack of LATAM in this index, and we'll dig into that a bit more. So some of the key findings: Seoul up 3 to number 9, Tokyo up 5. They dipped out of top 10 several years ago and have returned. Paris doing particularly well, Miami doing particularly well as well. Some movement among the Europeans. I'm running through this quickly because this is a mammoth report that is well worth looking through in more detail, and I won't do it justice in the limited time I have available. It does show the overall startup funding downturn last year across the world. Very few countries, economies, and ecosystems not impacted by that. And actually, below COVID era investment as well, or pre-COVID era investment as well. Optimism around AI, Gen AI, and the kind of significant increase in investment going into AI-related companies over the past year or so, and also clean tech, advanced manufacturing, blockchain, a few interesting movements there. Interestingly, the emerging ecosystems are increasing their share of the overall global startup ecosystem. So the rise of the developing emerging economies and the kind of significant investment that public policies and governments are making into developing ecosystems in places like Saudi and elsewhere. And this is where we kind of start to cut and make sense of the LATAM side of things. So it is quite a small subset of the overall total ecosystem value compared to US and overall global. I'll pause long enough for you to take a photo. And within that, there is one notable player of Sao Paulo, Mexico, Bogota, Rio, a few others. So quite small, quite early stage. And still averaging the same kind of overall share of total ecosystem value over the past few years. This is a kind of a breakdown of the ecosystems covered in the GSERs at the moment. And I will note the GSER is ecosystem level, so mostly cities or regions or similar kind of defined ecosystems rather than nations. And we'll come back to that later. So that's kind of the overall breakdown. There are gaps that Genome and ourselves are very keen to plug, but that shows the kind of overall performance relative to the global rankings. And a bit more information there. I think that's the full list of our LATAM ecosystems that we cover. And you will see kind of from a country perspective, Latin America, Caribbean, quite obviously gaps there. And I think they have accidentally labeled Cordoba as Spain rather than Argentina. Oops. Apologies to representatives of Cordoba. So this is where we can briefly touch on a new research output that we're starting later this year. We announced this on Monday on the announcement stage, but I'll run through it again very briefly. Responding to the feedback from a lot of national governments wanting a national index and being able to compare the impact of their national policies to others, we're launching the Apex Nations report later this year. We're working with AB startups in Brazil, we're working with G20, and we'll do an initial publication in November this year that will rank countries. Again, it will bring together the national data, the investment, the sector breakdown, the startup valuation, and other aspects. It will also dig into some of the underlying policies that enable entrepreneurship. And the point is that it is focused on actionable insights for national governments and helping them understand what steps they can take to increase their ecosystem effectiveness and the kind of potential around entrepreneurship. We're also going to launch an audit for governments underpinned by the methodology of this new report, so helping governments make sense of policy areas across 10 kind of key areas to help them better understand kind of where they rank, where the opportunities are for development. We're open to countries kind of joining us to join in the initial report. We may or may not be able to kind of work countries into the current inaugural coming this November, but we are looking to release the next major release at GEC 25 in Indiana, and we're looking for government partners to help bring their countries on board as well. So that's GSER, that is Apex Nations, more information on our website, but that is, at the moment, the state of our kind of insights on LATAM entrepreneurship, so from an ecosystem perspective, and hence there is much more for us to do, and we very much hope that we can expand the coverage, particularly as we move to nations. Now, did we have... Talia. Hello. So we have got a phenomenal panel lined up to talk about, to dig in some of that and kind of reflect on some of the gaps and the opportunities around that. Before then, Natalia of Ecuador, AEI, have I got that acronym right? AEI. You wanted to share some insights that you've been doing with ProDem on state of LATAM entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you for the time and to make sure that everyone that is working in this like measurement and evaluation of ecosystems is together. So thank you to both of you for the invitation. And Ecuador is not being, let's say, measuring from a startup genome. We couldn't make the arrangement finally to get into the map and go inside of what is going on. However, as a private organization, we are NGO who gathers more than 180 actors in the ecosystem in Ecuador from different parts of the country. And we understand the importance of getting to know what is really happening in the ecosystem and what type of funds and what are the types of entrepreneurs that are growing or that are starting up, and also what are the verticals where we should like focus the different efforts and resources. So we gather with this HEYAL is an initiative that started 2 years ago, which is measuring what is going on in cities in the region. So we are already in total we are 22 cities along in different countries from Argentina to Mexico. And the thing that is happening like as a result, first of all, is that you get data from what is going on in your ecosystem, measuring human talent, also financial resources, and how is your CTI capacities, innovation and technology, and from that point, you can start taking actions on that. In Ecuador, we are measuring 5 different cities, and this is allowing us to talk more from the relevant data that we are gathering from the different stakeholders, and from that point, we have already started 3 different projects that I'm going to mention just as an example. One is policy making wise, like we are already working in adjustments and in the elaboration of a new, it's not a law, but it's in local government, it's called Ordenanza, which is already enabling the creation of seed capital for entrepreneurs in 2 different cities, which comes out of the result of the studies. So this is one. The other one is that we are creating an innovation hub, which we already knew that we needed to start working more in innovation and technology adoption. But I think with the data, you can actually have the support and having the picture to tell the mayor of the city or the different authorities that this is a pain that if we are not really like putting some medicine on, then it's going to start growing and it's going to be hurting more and more. So we are taking action now. We are creating this innovation hub. It's just starting. It's not, I wouldn't say we have results because it's just 1 year from we had the actual results. So it's going to take time, but we are taking actions. And that is the importance of measuring and understanding what is going on in your local ecosystems and the collaboration, how you can start talking with each other and sharing these do's and don'ts, and how this is gonna help your own ecosystems because you don't have to copy paste, but you can actually understand what they did, and then after that you can start working with your own dynamic and with your own realities. So happy to share more about these different initiatives that we are doing, and thank you again for being part of this room.
Thank you, Natalia. So we're going to move on to panel discussion, and really the goal of this and why we're dedicating most of this session to a panel discussion is it is so rare to actually have academics in the same room as policymakers, as entrepreneurs, as other ecosystem builders. And we are guilty ourselves of having closed-door gatherings of academics and researchers talking about how we conduct the research, and this is an opportunity, particularly in person, to open that up a bit and to allow the various ecosystem actors to kind of get insights from the academics, but also quiz them and throw questions towards them as to the challenges that you may be facing as an ecosystem builder or as an entrepreneur, as a policymaker or similar. So I'm going to hand over to our chair, Ted Zoller, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who is a very strong advocate for entrepreneurship, very strong supporter of GEN and the research network. And Ted, you're going to introduce our phenomenal panel and take our conversation forward.
We have a very diverse set of academic leaders with us today, and it's fascinating when you think about entrepreneurship research. While we've been at it as I would say a group of scholars for about 45 years, our work has gone through several arcs, and the first arc was really on social psychology. What makes up an entrepreneur? Who is an entrepreneur? Was the question that was being really posed. And then there was a whole focus on firm-based dynamics. We call the success hypothesis, a whole decade of work being done on what makes a high-performance firm versus a lower-performing firm. And then recognition of the firm embedded in an economy, largely as a result of Michael Porter's work. Then bringing it up into macroeconomics and then microeconomics. Again, 5-year cycles right behind Michael Porter and the whole notion of strategic advantage. And now it's ironic, we're coming back around the horn, looking now again on, I would say, the two big future foci for entrepreneurship will be on kind of unpacking the entrepreneurial mindset, what makes up an entrepreneur, and a lot of it is going to be in neuropsychology and neuroscience, believe it or not. And then the other big arena will be in the area of understanding failure and the nature of failure, and failure as an experimental process. AI is going to take us in lots of new directions, and probably all of these fields these areas of research that have been built up over time will continue to evolve much more quickly as a result of some of the research that's available. The real limitation of everything going on in entrepreneurial research is the availability of data that could lead to prediction. Most of it is data that is looking retrospectively, looking historically, to be able to actually have data that will allow us to move forward to understand what will happen as a predictive modality or a predictive indicator of future economic progress. But the thing that brings us all together is entrepreneurship that is focused on improving the human condition, opportunity, opening opportunity for others. And many of the most interesting pieces of research coming out now are really around structural and systemic limitations to economic progress. So understanding those limitations by way of capital, by way of human preparation, as well as by way of market dynamics will be, I think, an area of pretty interesting pursuit. So what we have is a panel that is going to help us understand kind of what are the most important advancements that are being made now to kind of add on the dialogue I just started, but also to talk about what are the most fundamental deficiencies, or what are the areas where we would call on future research to help remedy. And I'm going to actually ask each of the panelists if they could quickly introduce themselves and then answer the question, what do you believe is the next big frontier in research, and then what are the biggest deficiencies in our area of understanding entrepreneurship as a phenomena. Is that a fair way to approach it, Matt and Tom? Okay. Who would like to start? I'm going to look at Stacy Ann because she usually knows how to get things going.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Ann Wilson. I am a senior lecturer in political economy at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, which is based in Jamaica. We're a regional university. We have an incubator on the Mona campus that deals with entrepreneurship and IP transfer for faculty. We don't do that well, but we are trying. I have been working on pretty much all sides of the of the entrepreneurship scale, from an entrepreneur, an ecosystem builder, I do programs, and I do policy. So I have had a play in pretty much all the areas. And the biggest challenge for me in an environment like, so I'm speaking on behalf of the English-speaking Caribbean, just to be clear, because we have other Caribbean people, but, so the Caribbean is about, just for context, the population of the Caribbean is about 44 million. The population of the English-speaking Caribbean is about 6 million.
Huh.
So when you put that in context, and we're not even including Latin America, which we're always, attended to, Latin America, and the Caribbean, like we're just an afterthought, really. But when you put that 6 million within just the Caribbean, we're not even talking about we're not talking about Latin America. We're just talking about the Caribbean. When you take that 6 million that are fragmented, by geography, because we're little dots in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. When the lack of proper transportation between one place to the next. Our largest English-speaking country is 2.8 million. Our smallest is under 5,000. So we're talking about really significantly smaller market share of everything. You have import-dependent spaces. We have all of these English-speaking Caribbean spaces have only gotten their independence since the 1960s. They are former enslaved, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but there's former enslaved populations. So the mindset in which we talk about entrepreneurship is very different in these spaces, because for a very long time, being a self-sustaining, self-reliant, this was not part of the definition of self. You couldn't define self. So when we talk about entrepreneurship and we talk about trying to measure things and whatever, sometimes we're starting at the wrong place because we don't even understand how people see themselves. The box in which has been placed around them and that they place around themselves actually has an impact on the way in which we develop or don't develop. So when we talk about, wanting to have economic development through, entrepreneurship and self-reliance, but we don't actually give space or room or policies to actually support the mental unshackling that is required to do entrepreneurship. So for me, we fall down a lot because we have assumptions that are based on Western definitions of things and Western understandings of how economies work. In the English-speaking Caribbean, it's a fairly dependent space. It's dependent on North America, it's dependent on Europe for everything, whether it's food, every version of its economy. It's an export, facing sort of economy. So you're already in a space where you're telling people in order to grow, you have to leave. In order to develop, you must look somewhere else. And then if an investor looking at you is saying, well, we can't see how we're investing in you because there's only like 10,000 people in your country. So already you're in a very different space. But as researchers, we're not factoring in those things because our starting position is that we have to do a literature review, and the literature says, right? We're not looking around going, okay, what are the people saying? What's actually happening here? So sometimes our starting position is not the right position. So for me, the future of research in this space has to be more iterative. It has to be more democratic. It has to be more engaging, because we're not going to go anywhere with just looking at it from an academic point of view. We haven't gone anywhere just looking at it from an academic point of view.
Stacy, can I do a follow-up? Nice. Some of the most interesting projects I've had are in what I call walled gardens or small worlds. And it suggests perhaps the Caribbean could actually be an amazing research base for entrepreneurship because of that function. You know, what are value-added functions that are taking shape within the community of the island nation relative to things that are brought in from the outside. That whole import-export kind of question is actually fundamentally teasing out potentially an entrepreneurial value-added revolution within the country. How do you think about that, and does that represent an opportunity? Have you seen scholarship that takes advantage of the fact that you have independent economies?
We don't do it explicitly. I think we do it in small group, in that small world. We'll do it with each other. Like, we'll have the conversation within. But there is some shyness sometimes in having that conversation externally.
Interesting.
Because there's no comparative example. You know, outside of maybe a sort of subgroups in the US of African Americans or indigenous people, we don't have an exemplar to say, okay, well, a solidarity economy is happening over there, and it actually connects to, like, say, the Rastafari, you know, cooperative economy that happens in Jamaica or whatever. When you say that to other people, they look at you crazy, right? So we have to build up that. It's our responsibility. So I take responsibility for that. We have to build up that awareness because we can't expect people to know, right? So you have to actually build up that awareness so that when we do these small worlds and bring in a multitude of small worlds, we're telling a story that makes sense, or we're sort of singing a nice little chorus. Yeah. But it's my responsibility. I take that. It's my responsibility to ensure that we become more known for that story. So I take that from you. I take that.
It sounds like a panacea for engaged entrepreneurship, along with the way Matt was talking about action research being kind of a key opportunity. Yeah. Well, why don't we turn to Barbara Cotto, number 1. Where's Barbara Cotto, number 2?
She's on the other side.
There she is, Barbara Cotto, number 2. We were joking about that. They actually share the same name, first and last. Pretty fascinating. Barbara, share a little bit about your background and the question I posed regarding kind of where we stand and what are we missing.
Of course. There we go. Thank you, Ted. I am Barbara Cotto. Who am I? Currently, I am the director, right, for a unit which is Business Innovation and Growth for Florida International College of Business. This is a new appointment as I've been building programs, developing the ecosystem for the last 7 years with Florida International. We first started with an initiative that was oriented towards policy and procurement. And with that, I basically became engaged and moved things forward, have pursued several grants to try to build capacity for entrepreneurs in South Florida. Prior to that, my career was in corporate. So therefore, I come in from the other side of the spectrum, understanding how things operate in the corporate side versus the academic. And having that knowledge, I decided that academics was part of those passions that I had been kind of postponing. And entrepreneurship became that thing that anchored to my heart and pushed me to become an academic. And today I'm also a lecturer on social entrepreneurship at Florida International University. Answering Ted's question, and I think that standing by Stacy on some of the points that she brought in, the reality is that I can speak today from the Puerto Rico entrepreneurship perspective, from the Dominican Republic entrepreneurship perspective, but also how it looks like in South Florida, where we have an infusion of all cultures, right? And that the economy depends very much on the export side. And that means that many of us participate, and when I mean that is the Caribbean, Latin America, and Central America. And how does that behave, and how does that impact our ecosystem overall? As I have been working with all these different types of entrepreneurs and beginning my research, I have realized that there is a lack of understanding, one, where the gaps are in terms of the level that they can achieve, because we need to understand that some of them become entrepreneurs by need as a way to survive. Some others find an opportunity or they maximize, obviously, their set of skills. But on the other hand, some of them come in with a background, right? And they had some formal instruction to it. But what we are not capturing, and where there is a lot of misconception, if I will put, and we should focus some of our research, is how being pushed out of your country, being forced to step out and say you have to go out to become something, to have a voice, and to drive economy moving forward, how do you pay back or how do you influence your country back? And what do I mean by that? We have an economy in South Florida that most likely is not stable nor belongs to South Florida. We have a lot of economic movement that comes in from Central America entrepreneurs, many from South America, and last but not least, as a Puerto Rican community in the diaspora, we have 22% of basically the constituents in the Central Florida area that are Puerto Ricans, that today are entrepreneurs, and that they are not receiving any assistance to move their businesses forward. Not only that, we haven't been able to have the capacity to capture the data as to how many transactions happen between Florida state itself and that money coming back into the Caribbean islands. How does it impact our economic development? How does it impact employment? Without many other variances in the process, right? And we are dependent as well of anything that is exported, right? So that in one instance. Second piece of this is we need to actually begin to do more research as to why people are launching into entrepreneurship at the age of 40 plus nowadays. And what is the impact or the drive for it, because many of them are not necessarily being reskilled to adapt to the new needs of our economic development, or basically the needs of operating. Therefore, they are being displaced and they're being forced to become entrepreneurs at a later age. And I'm not saying that it only belongs to Puerto Rican specifically. If I take the sample of the data that we have been gathering for the last 6 years, I will say that I have sample data for over 6,000 entrepreneurs today that have a commonality. One is the access to capital. Two is actually understanding how to expand or work on the segmentation of their businesses, because they don't understand how could they possibly approach more. And three, in order for me to scale, what is it that I have to put in order in the back end of the house? And normally, as academics, we tend to say this is the process that you need to follow, not necessarily how do you implement. And we need to do more research regards to that. Aside from that, we have a large community of young fellas. Puerto Rico has a challenge currently with that area, as many other countries, but overall we still have people that attend to higher education institutions that are saying, if I cannot be positioned in a job, then might as well I will venture with entrepreneurship. Are we getting them ready for that matter? Are we giving them the right tools? That's something that needs to come up in discussion, and I will say more of the experiential learning side and the practitioner side than just the academic theory of. And I am in both sides. I've been in both sides of the spectrum, but moving forward, especially on my research, it has become a piece of challenge itself. With that, I just share some of my passions today.
It's really great insight into specifically what's happening here. And, you know, actually we're talking about how do you specify different economic phenomena around the region, and it gets very specific. Monica, you're with Georgia Tech, a storied institution. Georgia Tech is a unique institution. It's in the same category as MIT or a Caltech or a Rice or a Carnegie Mellon, very adept engineering school with a great science background. And you're doing economics and entrepreneurship there. Tell us a little bit about your view of the world.
Thank you, Ted. Indeed, Georgia Tech is a very interesting engineering school. Wait. And so I'm very proud to be part of Georgia Tech. I'm originally from Venezuela and have lived in the United States for the last 23 years. I am a researcher and a doctoral candidate at Georgia Tech, but prior to that, for the past 20 years, I have worked in different roles as university administrator, as a programs director, as a finance manager in the academic sector, private and public government. So my experience is also a combination of both being a practitioner and coming into the academic world and play different roles. And so my experience at Georgia Tech, I learned that applied research and the mission of the university to help with the economic development of a region is very important. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why I decided to pursue my PhD, because I wanted to be able to apply, to do things for the community and to put into practice a lot of the learning from the community. So currently my research is focused on innovation-led economic development with a special interest in innovation ecosystems, entrepreneurship, and university technology transfer. And why I am interested in university technology transfer, because the university has a unique position, any university in the region, to help convert or transfer research, innovation that is done in the labs into actual products, into actual solutions to the problems of the region. So I'm interested in learning how do public policies impact this, the possibility for universities to be able to transfer technology using my experience in Georgia Tech with a special interest in Latin America and the Caribbean, because throughout my experience, I have worked with different countries in Latin America and also here in Puerto Rico with different universities. And I have noticed the gaps, the challenges for universities in our countries to be able to let faculty, to let the students, to let researchers being able to pursue a startup or being able to license an innovation that they created in a lab. So it's very rigid, traditional universities. In some countries, they are trying to modernize a little bit. Chile, for example, is one of the countries that has done more to support university technology transfer. But I do believe that the university has the opportunity to be able to help bring prosperity and economic development to the regions. And so talking about education, which is also one of my passions, Stacy, you talk about, we're starting from the wrong place. We need to look at our region and our culture and our challenges and not try to duplicate models, to duplicate laws, regulations. For example, in the United States, the Bayh-Dole Act was a transformative legislation from the 1980s that helped universities be able to own the intellectual property rights to innovations that came out of the labs. Well, that legislation has been replicated, duplicated, implemented in many countries around the world, but little is known about how effective these laws are, especially because it's not simple just to copy and paste a legislation or a law in another country without making any adjustments to the realities. And the other thing that I believe is important for future academic research is to take in consideration that entrepreneurs in many of the Latin American countries are still need to become more globally minded, more, understand if they find a solution to a problem in their country, they can test it there, they can validate the solution there, but that problem has to exist in many other parts because our countries are small. Most of our countries are small, except Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, but they need to start thinking with a global mindset, with the ability to just not just go to the next country, to the neighbor country, but even to across the ocean to other continents like India and so forth. So those are my ideas for where the future of research is right now, and we can continue the discussion.
So with Matt's permission, I would like to suggest that we bring other people into the conversation. I want to have a bit of a mental experiment. Let's just say that as an academic or as a leader in entrepreneurship, you've been asked to oversee a new foundation. Let's say Carlos Slim gives all of his money, let's say $200 million, or $200 billion, to not million, 2 billion, to an effort to promote entrepreneurship research that's relevant and pressing for the economic development of Latin America, which includes Central America and the Caribbean. If you were responsible for encouraging that initiative, what would you believe are the most pressing topical areas you would first allocate that funding? Is that a fair question?
No.
What are the most pressing research questions to support? And I've learned from this panel that the primary question is around economic development, economic performance, maybe economic opportunity, and creating value add. Let's be clear. The issues have been driven by disparity. There are haves and have-nots in the world, and Latin America has more have-nots than it should have. Yet I see power whenever I'm in Latin America. I come back energized because the people are so awesome, and the region is so extraordinarily high potential. So going back to my theoretical question, what are the most important issues that need to be addressed by the research and policy community? Who would like to make a contribution?
That's a huge one.
I'm going to start cold calling in a moment. Natalia, do you have any thoughts on that? Natalia started out by giving us a really good view of a longitudinal research project that is going to have some pretty significant promise. But if you were given complete freedom financially to put together, you could hire 300 PhD students. You could recruit 95 top quality associate professors, and you would have a fleet of postdocs. And the government would be anxious to hear anything that you have on your plate. What would you do?
I think one of the things that we lack is a platform, like something that help us to automatize all the different interactions that we have from getting the data and then analyzing. And okay, there's always going to be a human factor that you need to understand, and then you can give this information to someone else. However, I think most of the time we are duplicating the actions among the actors, among the stakeholders in the ecosystems, because we don't have these collaborative platforms that we can all share together. And I think I would use the resources for that in the first place, because I think it's one of the things that take us too much time from us. And then in terms of what our ecosystem needs, the second thing would be to provide more technology on or how to help to accelerate different processes to create more added value in the proposals, like in everything we do. I think from the entrepreneur side, they do as much as they can because most of the businesses are created by need and not by opportunity. So they also don't have the data of what is in the market, what does the market needs. So most of the businesses stay little or they easily die, let's say. So I think it's very important to create these democracy programs to open these market opportunities to most of the different little businesses that are being created, and also to create more acceleration programs, because there is a big gap in how the companies stay in one stage, and then even the funds, the VCs, they want to provide resources, but they say, okay, the companies are not there yet. So this is something that we lack a lot. Like even the number of accelerators are very, very few, or even like none in some parts of the country. And then incubators, there's a lot, but most of them give the same content. So we need to start like creating more content and to open these platforms that are low cost or more accessible for the entrepreneurs. So that would be my two things that I would work if I don't have limited resources.
So the first $1 billion would be spent on a data mart, putting together good data, and the second would be trying to validate whether or not there are processes of acceleration that could be more efficacious, and maybe even studying acceleration as a function.
Yeah, not only in local market, but also like
Local,
regional
global.
and international market, because Ecuador is very small, so we need to think big. We need to think.
That's right. And whenever I
Global.
work with, I've worked with a lot of small places. I'm working with Luxembourg right now, to give you an idea. I'm working with Iceland. These are places that have to export in order to survive.
If I may, Ted.
That please, I'd love that.
My first $1 billion would be spent on quietening obstructionist politicians and their bureaucratic counterparts. Because some of our biggest issues are not about the ecosystem or about the entrepreneurs not having access. It's about the people who sit in positions of power who do not have foresight or creativity and imagination, and basically limit that for other people. My first $1 billion would be spent in sending them home. And
Without honor.
I don't think you would even need $1 billion for that. I would do that for $100.
because a lot can happen if you have really creative people who are willing. But if you have a disenabling environment, what do you do?
So I like to add to that, Stacey. One of the ideas that I've had since I started my doctorate program is to talk to policymakers and understand, okay, so we know that you're busy. We know that you don't have time to read all the data. You need to make decisions fast. But, I mean, can you talk to the people that have the problem to understand what is the real problem? Can we bring more design thinking or methodologies like that into policy making? I think I would spend a lot of money, a lot of that research money, in trying to foster more collaboration between policymakers, legislators, industry experts, the communities, and go through exercises like the entrepreneurs go through to validate what the problem is so that they can design the policies, the instruments that are right for that context.
You know, I would like to bring back a point you brought up, Monica. Universities are anchors in the community, right? Whether they are public universities or private universities. If I was to invest at least $1 million, right, the first thing that I will do is let's have some commonality in the language and the goals that we have and the responsibilities that we have for the community, with the community, right? Because at many times we talk about we need to make sure we educate this generation because it's the first generation of those that did not get the chance to have an education or formal education, right? But many times it's expected that unless the goals that we establish for programs and the funding that we raise aligns with the strategic plan of the institution, if they don't marry, some of these programs die, right? And then we constantly depend on setting up outside, and I'm going to bring the example for Puerto Rico with the Charpalante and El Fideicomiso, where they finally were able to shape the ecosystem with the collaboration of those that were willing to serve to move things forward, right? Personally, the first time that I heard the wonderful things that were happening in Puerto Rico's entrepreneurship ecosystem formally was last year through the Global Monitor report and was able to take part of it. But also, as someone that wants to give back to her community from the position that was able to attain leaving the island, my point was, all right, we have the report. Why is it so hard for policymakers, lobbyists, support the effort of raising the data that we need to move things forward and to break the cycle of poverty? We can break the cycle of poverty through entrepreneurship. But we first need to understand that culturally, we were embedded a different way, and we have to influence those around us, especially nowadays with a different generation, from very early on. So the work doesn't start only as to, okay, I grew up, I've been displaced from my job, I need to figure things out. This needs to be cultivated. There needs to be a sense of how do we modify curriculums or how do we enhance curriculum from early stage on to move things forward and give the right tools, because let's understand, entrepreneurship is a toolkit. And therefore, if you provide it at an early stage, how will that change the outcome of everyone involved? Furthermore, we have many people wanting to actually volunteer, bring their efforts forward. How do we set safe places that is not only in one region, but is across country to be able to support those? Because we need to understand, and I will bring back the example for Puerto Rico. The resources available for those that are in the metro area are not the same resources that are available in the west side of the island. Furthermore, in the center side of the island, right? If I take it to the example of the people that we work with in Florida, those that are in underserved communities, unless you go to the underserved community, unless you have a community rep or a community leader that will open up the forum for you, you're not able to go in and support and help. And then you have to earn the trust. So it is more about how do we use those monies to allocate the resources and the satellites, because at the end of the game, you will go in, you will do the work, you will gather the data that really will speak to where the gaps are, where are the opportunities and moving forward, but also institutions need to be welcoming and aligning and understanding their responsibility on how delivering moving forward. There is a point about IP and commercialization, which is that oftentimes we have to understand that as academics, many times we know what we know, and not necessarily our strength is actually to go in and commercialize. And potential ideas to solve problems coming through that route, and they don't move forward because we don't open also access to others other than the academic field to be able to commercialize or move these things forward. And there is a full world out there that can assist as well. I think that working in a setting of openness, allocating resources to understand culture, regionalization, gaps, and the problem that needs to be solved is worth the money, at least that $1 million or $1 billion should be invested at first.
Any other contributions? Because I want to shake it up a little bit. We even go further. So speaking from the North American Yankee imperialist perspective.
As long as you put it in context.
That's right. I'm surprised that when I looked at the data that was presented by Matt and Tom, how little attention was being placed on not only the economic power of Latin America, but its degree of integration with North America. And it occurs to me that the Canadian, Mexican, and American markets are relevant to Latin America. And when I looked at the data, I saw Mexico and Brazil very well represented in all the other countries due to critical mass in most cases, kind of in the middle. Everyone else kind of left in this big mass. I just spent part of my summer in Luxembourg near the Schengen. And Schengen zone is where the European Union really came together and was given birth. And it occurs to me that the same economic opportunities are here in Latin America to work as a unit. South America and Latin America can work economically together to create economic power. I wonder, I'm just curious, would anyone allocate money to research on why there isn't a tighter integration economically between North America and Latin America as a question?
You don't want me to answer.
Ted, if I may answer by plugging the next session. Okay. This serves two purposes. After this, and I think we're on track to finish in about 7 minutes or so. There's a very good session over in session room 1, policy approaches to attract and support entrepreneurs. So we're going to hear from ProColombia, ProChile, Cambridge Innovation Center about what the efforts to help LATAM Caribbean countries land into the US and export and grow into the US, but also vice versa, their roles in attracting investment and talent back into the LATAM Caribbean region as well. So if no one around this table can currently answer, there may be some answers coming in the session afterwards.
We'll all migrate there. That's our thinking.
Take the party there.
Seems fair.
So we have 7 minutes left. What other topics would be relevant that you put on the table? I hope I didn't take the air out of the room by suggesting. I'm just surprised. I got to admit to you, from the American perspective, I'm surprised how little attention is being placed in the U.S. to Latin America, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. You should be our closest partners economically.
Yeah.
Sorry, Britain.
No, you do.
I would like to share about, we had a delegation, we set up a delegation to come to Miami just a few months ago to bring together the ecosystem from Ecuador to the States and to see what are the opportunities and the possibilities of start working together. And we previously did this to Spain and also Israel because we see them as the innovation hubs where we would like to learn from and also to create more opportunities like them. So in this visit, we already have 2 different programs. The one from Miami, we have already 2 different programs. One, soft landing opportunities to bring entrepreneurs to U.S. market because we've tried before, but it's very hard if you don't have a partner or an agent to help you to understand the market. And for entrepreneurs or small business, it's very expensive to come by themselves. So we are creating this with a new local partner there in Miami. And also there's a set of opportunities for bigger companies who want to start working more with technology and there are lots of different companies in Miami that are already doing this. So we are started sharing experiences. And it's just the first exercise. So I bet that there is so much more than we can do. I just wanted to share that because I think it's very important to start getting together and as you also look as an opportunity because it's always the other way around. Like we see, okay, what we can do with United States, because you are such a big market, but also there is like some opportunities that entrepreneurs as Waikana, that was just sharing today what they are doing with these beverages from Amazonic leaves, are good for health, and also other types of products that come from biodiversity that we have, and the types of the use of the ground, the different types of climate conditions that we have, that are also opportunity to create biotech hubs and other types of businesses. Also the space hub that Robert Dylon from Ecuador is also trying to promote and connect to United States. So I think you have a point, Ted. It's how you can see us as an opportunity. We are open to share what we have, but it's a two-way conversation.
No question.
But in a big way, though, the U.S. sees Latin America as an opportunity, but it sees Latin America as an opportunity that it can exploit.
That's right.
In that, I mean, I'm just saying the things. Because the U.S. has lots of businesses operating in Latin America and the Caribbean, willy-nilly. I mean, that sometimes don't pay taxes, they get tax holidays till forever. So that the space exists where the Latin America and the Caribbean invite the U.S. to participate. The U.S. doesn't necessarily invite Latin America and the Caribbean to participate on the other end. Yeah. So it's a one-way relationship. It's a very bad marriage.
It is. It's so unfortunate. I think we need to go through major marriage counseling.
Yes.
And it's sad that I think we're at the nadir of our relationship because we have our political dialogue, and I'm taking Jonathan Ortman's admonition that we stay out of politics, but politically we couldn't be in a worse position. Just basically, let's just build a massive wall. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
If anything, we should be, I mean, the diasporas of all of your countries are well represented in North America.
Correct.
And we need to be integrated fully. We should be looking at it hemispherially as opposed to the way we're looking at it.
And lower rates, lower salary rates.
Of course.
It's crazy when you see that you have a company, the same company in Puerto Rico and in the United States with the same job description, and they earn here half.
Right.
Doing the same job.
And it's the same country.
Right.
And it's Puerto Rico, not Latin America. So
Yeah.
It's just not Latin America.
I have a very good friend.
in Mexico, a lot of companies from the United States in Mexico, why? Because they pay cheaper there. But they are not giving this discount to the people. You pay the same.
I don't look at that as a negative either. I think that, it's a market question. And I take your point, Stacy, about exploitation. That's real.
Yeah.
But I don't believe it's in this generation as deliberate. I think it's benign neglect. I hope. There are nefarious people out there, don't get me wrong, but please.
Yeah, I'm Carlos Sosa Varela. I'm the Dean of the Division of Business, Tourism, and Entrepreneurship at Universidad Ana Jiménez in Puerto Rico, but also I'm the Associate Editor of European Business Review and Associate Editor of Revista Mitos y Empresas in Fundación Getúlio Vargas in Brazil. And in 2020, in the Council of Latin American Business Schools, we did a panel about the entrepreneurship challenges in Latin America. The result of this panel was a special issue in European Business Review titled Entrepreneurship Challenges in Latin America. We discussed these results in the Academy of Management in Seattle and then in the Ibero-American Academy of Management. And the results of these discussions was a new special issue, in this case with a Management Research Journal that's published on August 2024 about sustainable entrepreneurship, a new approach in Latin America. And some of the results or the recommendations is very similar that you discussed today. The first one is institutional environmental factors that include policy impact on entrepreneurship and the formal and informal economy. This is very, very particular especially in Central America and South America. And the second one for us that was the reason for the second special issue of management research was sustainable and social entrepreneurship, specifically the social entrepreneurship in Latin America because this impact poverty, inequality, that also is related with formal versus informal economy. And well, it's for me, it's a very interesting panel and discussion that respond many of the questions that today, many of the schools, for example, I'm working with Universidad del Desarrollo in Chile and Tec de Monterrey, Inca Business School, Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, that we are discussing this topic. And the first challenge is, as Stacy explained very well, is about of the institutional factors in all countries. Well, thanks for this amazing discussions.
Oh, well, with this, I'm going to turn it back to Matt, but I do with the power vested in me as the chair of the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, I direct staff to please take those 2 special issues to make sure they're distributed to everyone in attendance, because that's exactly the focus that we should be having. Yeah, I've just turned Matt into staff, and he's really my boss. I have to beg him for a cup of coffee with the authority that I have. So anyways, Matt, thank you for the privilege, and I'll turn it back to you. And Tom.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, and I think both my microphones may have died, but
just a pass it on.
received. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. This is at the heart of the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, having these conversations, bringing people together and trying to find actionable solutions, how we can work together to address some of these challenges, not just in this region, but beyond as well. So if you're not already a member of the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network, I hope that you will speak to myself or Tom and register, engage with us, continue these conversations. And we very much want to reconvene in 11 months' time in Indiana, having achieved a few notable outcomes, completed a few interesting projects, and hopefully advanced our understanding of entrepreneurship. So thank you, Ted. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Matt and Tom, for convening this.
Thank you very much.
And Ted, I look forward to the check.